One of the things that you'll notice as you study the book of Revelation is this repetitive theme that John begins to repeat over and over and over again. Themes like the Lamb of God, slain before the foundation of the world, the fact that there is a resistance against the church, the trumpets, the bowls, the seals. There are different things that seem to be the same, but yet from a different perspective. And that's all intentional. It's not meant to confuse you. It's meant to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. In life, we need to hear things multiple times and sometimes in multiple ways from different perspectives. John is writing the book of Revelation in the same way, and there's this thing called progressive parallelism. It's a big, long way to say John repeats himself in the same way, different ways. There are three ways in which we see this. First, there's two major divisions in the book. The first division is chapters 1 through 11. The second division is chapters 12 through 22. Both of them have different aspects to it, but the book is divided in two because you want to see on the front end what basically is the church being persecuted by the world. We see in the beginning an introduction to who it is that is revealing the revelation to John. It's Jesus, and he comes from the Father, and he writes many things to the churches, but the beginning of the first division really starts at chapter 4, and we see the persecution of the church, and then we see in the second half, we see the persecution of the church as well, but it seems like it's a different storyline, but it's not. Chapters 12 through 22 is the church that is persecuted by Satan through the world. And another way to say that is we see on the surface level at creation, at kind of like a real-time level, we see on the front end of the book, persecution that is tangible, that we can see the things that are happening around us. We feel the idolatry. We can imagine the things that are happening to the church and the timeline of riders on the horse bringing war and pestilence and famine, things that we can understand. The second half of the book is at a supernatural level, like what is happening beyond the natural, beyond the creation, behind the scene. What is the power behind it? This is the supernatural part of the storyline, the redemptive narrative of God. And so we have two parallel pictures, both speaking about the same thing, the tribulation of the church, the resistance against God's kingdom and his redemptive narrative. And that's why we see the parallelism of the two sections of the book. The second way that we see the parallelism is that we see the timeline of certain things are identical. In chapters 8 through 11, you see the times given of 42 months and 1,260 days. You see the same timeline in chapters 12 through 14, where you see 1,260 days and mention of 3.5 years. They're all the same time. 42 months equals 1,260 days equals 3.5 years. We see that these timelines are identical in these two sections. The third way that we see John repeating things is through the seven seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. They are parallel in the things that they reveal the judgments of God, the unfolding of tribulation and trials and the persecutions of the church. And so what we do is we look at the text and we say, what do we see repeated? What do we see being repeated in a different angle? And John will progressively throughout the book and intentionally parallel the stories so that we can see the intensity of the timeline, that we get this sense of here's one way to look at the history of the church, here's another way to look at here's a different image, here's a stronger image. We move from riders on the white horse to a beast coming up out of the sea with 7 heads, and on it is the rider that is the adulterous harlot, and the imagery just gets more graphic and more intense. And that's to drive home the point that John is trying to get, that the gospel, the work of God, the redemptive narrative has been unfolding, and there is powers and principalities that are behind the powers of the world, and he wants to sink it in. So that is progressive parallelism. Progressive parallelism, the repeating of the same thing throughout the book of Revelation to drive home a point.